Hello, world. Welcome back. Welcome back to BAM by Any Means podcast, Kentucky Harm Reduction Coalition. We are recording from Louisville, Kentucky, bringing it all the way out to the whole world. My name is Henry Lucas.
And I am Sharita Walden.
Hey, Shrita. How's it going?
Hey, it's going good. I've missed you, friend.
I know I've been sick. I got the flu, and I've been kind of taking some time to rest, and that's been
Good.
hard. It's been
I'm
hard.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Because Henry, you're not only, you know, the board chair of KYHRC, a phenomenal organization here in Louisville, Kentucky. Um, but you also have your own practice and you have kiddos, you have a squad, a home. That's a lot.
It is. It is. And being a productive and a forward thinking person who's always got things going on in my mind and in my world, it is so hard to find time to take care of myself, especially when I get sick.
I know everybody always talking about unplugging, but when we do this work, it can be difficult at times to unplug. And I'm so glad to have you back for a conversation.
It's good. It's good to be back. And we're going to keep this thing going after today. Actually, every other Thursday, folks can catch us actually for 90 minutes doing a live podcast. And so I'm really excited to be back in the saddle with that and really be
Yes,
able to offer a live version of the conversations, the important conversations that we get to have. So,
absolutely. Yes,
yeah,
I'm excited about the kickoff, Henry. We did great, really testing the waters last month, and really seeing where our audiences lie and coming to that decision was not difficult for us. We have a lot of people who are interested in the conversations. They want to be a part of it and being intentional by saying, okay, we're going to give you the days out in advance so that you will know when to join.
yeah.
Um, so, with that being said, this is a pre recording, but we would love for you guys to please like, share, and comment. We will have people from our organization inside the comments when this air, so they'll be able to chat and respond to you. We want you to subscribe. We got a flyer that we'll be posting to specific individuals who join our community. So if you want to be a part of this community, by any means, BAM's community, we want to get out this invitation for a live discussion between Henry and I. If you ever heard of a fireside chat, that's what I want you to think of when preparing for our next our first in-person event. All right. So like, share, comment, and we're going to dive in today. Our topic is, what do we land on, Henry? Surviving. I'm trying to remember, you guys.
The system, surviving the
There,
system.
there it is. I think my brain kind of spazzed out for a second because, woo, surviving the system.
That's a lot, right? I mean, that's generations, populations, communities, right? I mean that's kind of the people that we serve a lot of times are, I don't want to say caught up in the system, but are a product, right? In an innocent bystander of so many of them of the systems that we work with, that we fight
Mhm,
against, right? That we
mhm.
challenge, right? The status
Absolutely.
quo of the impact that some of these systems have on the folks throughout our communities.
Absolutely. I think it's always interesting as a harm reductionist, right? And the clinician in this work. We have so many ways that we have to balance it. And I find that when I go and talk to individuals, and I'm really hoping people who tune into this segment are people who work in this field, that have licenses, that have these ethical responsibilities and these duties to report to systems. I hope they get a chance to check this out. Um, But I think it's cool for us to kind of talk about how we navigate, right? How we navigate being within a system, working with them collaboratively, woo, right? And how we engage and make sure that we're still meeting our community's needs by any means. Like, woo,
Yeah, and there's an interesting concept. We need people protesting, right? We need people picketing, out front of the courthouse and other judicial buildings and institutions. Like, we need the rallies, right? Like, we
mhm,
need people in the streets, but we also need something else. And this idea that I came across a few years ago of what's called a tempered radical.
mm.
And what we need is
Write
we
that down.
need people that are ready to radically revolutionize these systems that we work with and that we work in and that we work against. And what that looks like is really changing the institution, changing the system from within. And if you work for probation and parole, or if you're uh, uh, an attorney, or if you work in any metro government department, you work in a university, wherever you're at, and whatever system that you're in, it is our responsibility to not just make change from the outside, but
Mhm.
to carry these things with us and to make changes inside of these institutions that so many of us work in. And again, the concept or the identity is called the tempered radical. So
I love that.
just a little nugget.
I wrote that down. I wrote that down. As I sat with what it means to survive, it was like we have to start, I guess, from the beginning. And people often are, how do you show up in spaces and continue to be authentic and meet with people who are on the other side of the aisle of the work we do? And the first thing is what we do, and I'm of course gonna let Henry speak for himself. But the first thing is for like our own state and our city, there is a very real and serious push to improve the health, well-being, and safety of all communities. There is sitting at the top as even a focus from our state is revolutionary in itself. Now I want people to hear me. Health, well-being, and safety is something that at KYHRC we promote, and as a person in a community just living here and being a human is what I promote, because I'm aware that that is a concept and it's a way of life and it's a move that joins all of us in every aspect. I believe at the root of it is something that's a common goal that we all want.
Yeah.
Now, the next level is, how do we actually get there? And I think that's where people get really caught up. It's like, well, how could you support a concept? Well, I support it because it's natural for me to want to see Henry and my friends and people in my circles. It's natural for me to want to see them be healthy. Now, the discussion and where it gets a little wonky and where we're talking about surviving is the how. What do you think about that, Henry, as far as sharing with our communities?
I think before we get to how, I think that really the next thing is the who.
Ooh, no, you're right. You're right. Who?
And I think that's kind of where I think that's really where you were wanting to go and kind of focus on. But
Mm-hmm.
like we all have this sort of vision that, okay, we want healthy communities, and we want safe communities, and we want people to have opportunity, and
Mm-hmm.
we want to see our neighbors be able to thrive,
Right.
right? We all share that, right? We all share that, like, regardless of where we live, how we were brought up, like which
Mm-hmm.
part of the state or which part of the country we live in. But see, oftentimes, right, that next rung of how is only reserved for the certain who.
Mm.
You see,
Mm.
and so we have to really start to look at. I think before we get to the how, we have to look at who, right? Because
Whew.
it's been a great privilege that only certain who's get to experience the hows.
Mm. Mm.
And I think that's got to really be the focus first before we get to the how. I had a professor, say, if I'm not sitting at the dinner table, I might find out that I'm on the menu.
Right. Right.
Right? We could call it discrimination. We could call it
Mm-hmm.
prejudice. We could call it bias. We could call it, on the other side, we could call it privilege, or we could call it
Mm-hmm.
those that are most deserving. But without looking at race and gender and economic status, we put conditions on the who's and how they're going to transition into the how.
Mm.
We do that in this westernized world, that we know it's our God given right to have clean water to drink. We know that it's our God given right to have a house to live in. We know it's our God given right to exercise free will into the
Mm-hmm.
confines of principle and safety, but it's reserved for the who under certain conditions.
Hmm.
And I think that's the problem, is the conditions that we operate on, that we ultimately get to dictate who get to really experience things that are our birthright.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
So
That. Go ahead.
yeah, that's kind of my initial thoughts before we get to the how. I mean, I think before we look at revolutionizing, I think before we look at, making changes in laws and regulations, we have to look at, well, who's going to be left out, who's going to be affected, right? Who's going to be greatly impacted.
I agree, and I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm glad you pointed out that step before we get to the how, and I think it actually helps people understand when you went back to the who. And so when we think about what, as a collective, when I'm listening to you say that, what it made me think about is where House Bill 5 came from.
Yeah,
It's one of the pieces of legislation for everyone to know that how they're addressing safety and health and well-being through a lens of more utilizing our law enforcement, services. I'll leave it with a real general, because it's a policy that should be unpacked at a different time. But when we talk about the who, and when we talk about bringing people to the table, and especially what your professor said, which comes from a quote that's been shared over decades. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? When we think about the people who helped put together that policy, and just go from the root that everyone's focused on improvements, health and well-being, the who at the table were actually coming from their lens. So if we see House Bill 5 says, it is unsafe for people to be on the street. Let's unpack just this one piece. It is unsafe for people to be on the street living in tents. Now, as a person who's a harm reductionist, been outside with my team, Henry, doing the work here at KYHRC, we in fact can share about the unsafe conditions of being on the street. I saw a rat that was as big as a small chihuahua variant, a chihuahua. That's not okay. I saw that there were not conditions to be able to shower and properly wash your hands so that you can reduce the spread of sickness. I saw the inability to use proper restrooms. So there is a lot of unsafe conditions that can lead to unintended medical conditions. That's a truth. But when we have people at a table that are focused from their lens of safety, then they apply the rules, they apply the policy language that comes from that lens. Can we talk about what that looks like, Henry? There's a question on the screen. What is the criminalization of survival in the context of our people? Survival actually look like in our communities?
Yeah. Well, I'm curious from you, this criminalization of survival. What, because we don't see that, right? Criminalization is one thing, survival is another thing. You put them together, and it's tough to even think about what criminalization of survival could mean. What is the definition of that, though, in your perspective?
In my perspective, it is the response with a punitive action, a punitive consequence to someone behaving and reacting to the conditions in which they live.
Yeah.
That to me is what criminalization is, a punitive response to someone's action or behavior that's a result of the conditions and the environment in which they live.
Yeah. Very well said. And you know what it reminds me of? Our health and wellness lounge.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we gather data at our health and wellness lounge. If you're ever interested in knowing more, certainly reach out. It's basically a drop-in center for folks that need support, and whatever support looks like. And through our data, we found out the 3 greatest needs from participants that come to our health and wellness lounge, and it's food. Okay, I get that. Water. Okay, I get that, especially in the summertime when we get that. It's weird, to be in Louisville, which is kind of a Midwest city. It sure feel like we're in the deep South in the summertime.
It does.
We ain't in Chicago no more.
No.
So I get water. It's a basic, it's a basic necessity. But one thing that I was really surprised at, right, was that third one, restroom.
Mm-hmm.
Right, restroom. And remember, before we signed our lease at the Health and Wellness Lounge, and we went over there, and we would walk around and we would tour. And do you remember that there would be feces on the ground?
Yep.
There would be urine stains on the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've opened and we've got our partner Vocal, who's next door doing phenomenal work too, and we allow people to use the restrooms unconditionally.
Right.
Because you can't use no restroom if you're houseless, or if you're Roman, or if you're a person who chooses to use drugs. You're not going to be able to find somewhere safe to use public restroom. Allowing people to use the restroom has actually impacted people's need to use the restroom on the street.
Mm-hmm.
It's not simply, right, this survival thing, just by simply adding the ability to use the restroom has had a significant positive impact on the area around our health and wellness lounge. And I think that's a smaller sort of snapshot of the bigger picture. Because the truth is, the solution to the how to meet the need for the who, the solution isn't really going to be that revolutionary. The solution is going to be in the lines of being considerate and compassionate for the most basic human needs that folks have in our community, in all of communities. Right?
Henry, you just hit the nail on the head, especially when you say it's not going to be this big shiny thing that comes launching down. And a lot of people don't, they think It's got to be something very complex and complicated, and it's not.
No.
It's as simple as that. And there's so many stories, and we could describe what that looks like in the who. It really stuck out to me to focus in on that who. And thank you for sharing and highlighting the simplicity of what the lounge brings. I will tell you guys, a lot of people come from our, capital all the way down to our local folks who are local leaders right here in our city, come to our lounge, and they often are coming because our response is quite simple. What Henry said, it's a drop-in center to meet people's needs. And people want to lay eyes on it because they're like, what does that even mean? So what do you do? But once they come in, what I've recognized is once a person actually steps foot in the lounge who came in with lots of questions, it's as if those questions went away.
Yeah.
It's as if they had no more, let's just call it what it is. They want to see if it's a truth, if it's lies, if it's something that doesn't make sense, if it's a trap house. That's the other one. If it's a trap house, they're actually doing what I love for people to do, which is check their assumption. They're coming in with a large assumption, and no, they don't go, well, I assume. They go, wow, I didn't realize.
Yep. And we even have, I won't share the name, but we've got a local congressman who will be touring the Health and Wellness Lounge in the next couple of weeks. So it is not really a novel idea. It's really taking the heart of and the principles of harm reduction, and it's really about meeting folks literally where they're at. And receive any of our services, there's no condition. You don't have to be sober. You don't have to attend some group. You don't have to go to meetings. You don't have to have a driver's license, right? You don't have to have a telephone, a social security card.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so many of these organizations that provide services have conditions which limits the who. Which limits the who. And we want to pull the who in so we can really get a snapshot of what we can do to create the how that encompasses the solution and the goals to move everyone forward together.
So now, here's that difficult part where by any means gets its name. Because I'm sure people are watching this like, yeah, but what do we do about people who don't want to stop, Sharita? What do we do about people who do not want to go to treatment? So this is the thing. Those are the comments that we do receive. Well, I hear you, but like you just said, well, they don't want to do anything with their life. So we just let people go, or we don't lock them up. Like, I get it. And I'm sure you're watching this like, yeah, it sounds good. So Henry, I mean, how do we first start to help people unpack that?
Look, I taught this class a few years ago at one of the local universities. I was an instructor, and the class was it was a social work class for graduate students, and I forget the class. But one of the first things we did in the class, we did the diversity walk. And the diversity walk, basically you get everybody in the class or the group, wherever you're at, you get them all on one side, and everybody starts in the same area. And then you ask questions, if you're white, take a step forward. If you make more than, $50,000 a year, take a step forward. If you're a man, take a step forward. And I went through this process that many times. And when we're done, I always like to debrief. And I said, how do we get here when we all started at the same place? And in my
Mm.
blind privilege and in my ignorance, I learned something from one of the students that day. One of these students said, "We don't all start in the same place. We
Mm-hmm.
don't all start in the same place." So this health and wellness lounge, for example, not everybody that comes into the wellness lounge is at the same place, even if the majority
Right.
of them are houseless, even if 20% of them use substances, even in that 20% of substance users, doesn't mean that they're all going to be starting in the same place.
Right.
So we have to know where folks are, because when we start programs, when we start enacting laws and regulations and policies that's going to impact the who, doesn't mean that the who is all going to be starting at the same place.
Mm.
So we all might be in the same hole, but the hole might be deeper. Some of us may need to climb higher or climb more or move faster in order to get to the same place that somebody else is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly things like race
Mm-hmm.
and gender that impact that. And then there's other things like poverty,
Mm-hmm.
right? That impact that. And I think if we
Absolutely.
look at the underlying issue for the participants that we serve, I would say the underlying issue across the board is poverty.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Despite again their race, despite their gender, despite any of those, again, I'm not dismeaning or discounting. Those are important to consider. But if we're to really sort of level the playing field and look at it subjectively, one thing that all of our participants really share is the majority of them, if not all, fall somewhere in that poverty range.
Absolutely.
And so then we're looking at things like housing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's places that provide housing, but you got to be sober. You got
Right.
to have a job. You got to
Mm-hmm.
go do these things. Well, how can I do that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting way back here. So and so, they can do that, but they started right here. So it doesn't really make sense. The,
Mm-hmm.
the system is going to come up with solutions, and by nature, there will be outliers and people will be excluded.
Right.
So
And
my question, yeah,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, my question is, what's fair?
Right. Right. So and as you were talking, it's getting me hyped up because as you were describing the different ways that we are engaging the system and how the system is impacting our participants, it's like I could visualize it, and in that last segment of what you said, it made me want to throw this out to the viewers. And as you're watching, I want you to reflect on this. How often do you feel like you get whatever your task, whatever is in front of you accomplished? How often do you get this thing that you need to do accomplished on an empty belly, or when you have a headache, or if you have a bill that is so late that you could get your lights cut off? And I'm having you reflect because the idea that people just need is the response. It comes from a place where our empathy, our inability to see beyond what's happening right in front of us, it comes from that place. And it's often a place of ignorance. And we all fall into that sometimes. But I want to share the reason I brought up that question for everyone to reflect is, as Henry shared about the how and the who, the story that I want to share is about a previous participant, really quickly, who came into our lounge, who was very frustrated and angry, and sat down in a spot that was not a part of our safety protocol. So it was behind another staff person. And one of our staff went to approach this individual and said, the same thing we usually say in their calm manner is, I would need you to move to the other side. And they became very agitated and angry just off of the ask, the simple request. And so I stepped in and I immediately said, hey, can I find out what you came in for today? What brought you in today? And this individual said, I just need to eat. I just need to eat. Can I eat? Can I eat, please? You all said you have food. We put out like a sandwich board and it says we have food.
Yeah.
I said, okay, let's get this gentleman something to eat. And this individual staff person gave him something to eat. And the matter of minutes that this person scoffed down that food, it really touched my heart and everyone that was observing this. And it was almost within the seconds of him ingesting the food, you could see his whole body just sit. And I reapproached this person. I said, hey, can I talk to you over here on the other side? That individual got up, came to the other side with me, sat down, and started sharing how far they walked to get to our lounge to eat and how far they have to walk back. And I shared that to say, if I was not coming from the lens of harm reduction, which is, it's not about me, it's what's happening right now. I've done nothing personal to offend this person. There's something else going on. My only role here is to make sure that I meet them where they are. And if they're not ready to engage, what can we do? If that step back, de-escalate, whatever. If I wasn't doing that, that situation could have easily turned into a criminal situation where we're calling law enforcement, where we're asking law enforcement to bring this person down. And potentially this person could end up escalated and locked up because they simply had not eaten yet. When we're talking about criminalization of survival, that's a perfect example. An individual who has the same need that all of us share, which is, if we're hungry, our body sends us signals that say, oh, I need to eat right now. My temper is low. My patience is going to be low. I might not engage properly with people. Criminalization starts from us not being able to see beyond what's happening in that moment, right? What do you think about that, Henry?
Most of the time when I'm hungry, I got to walk less than 10 feet. And most of the time when I eat, I ain't even hungry.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
Right.
Right? And so why is it still so damn difficult and inaccessible for food?
Right.
And quick shout out to our partners
Yes.
who make it happen that we can provide hot meals. We can provide cold meals, that we have food that is readily available on the days that we're at the Health and Wellness Lounge. Because it's something that they do really well, and we recognize that it is a need for our participants.
Yes. Feed Louisville is an amazing partner. Absolutely.
And we're not just talking about, bologna sandwiches wrapped up in tinfoil. We're talking about really good quality food that's prepared in a industrial kitchen by chefs. Yes. Right. So shout out to our partner Feed Louisville for that. That's really important.
And that's what so as I know we're getting close to time, and I just want to highlight, as you're listening, that you see how the who, when Henry shared the who and how we're actually weaving in the how. How do we address these things without the criminalization, a tool and the use of criminalization or penalization, right? we're already, and the question has come up, if criminalization isn't the answer, what revolutionary alternatives do we need to push instead? Listen, we're talking about it as we engage in this conversation. And Henry talked about the Health and Wellness Lounge, the weaving in. We see the who, our participants, the public, our people. But we can't get to the how without the who. So the how, the Health and Wellness Lounge, which many partners come into our space and help us meet our clients' needs. Feed Louisville. Again, is it really revolutionary? Like Henry said, it's really some basic stuff. We've had to revolutionize basic humanity is one of my pet peeves right now, is that we are revolutionizing basic humanity. Caring for our brother and sister, caring for the people in our circles and the people who are impacted by the conditions of a community that they did not contribute to. So,
well, and we're at a stage of our society and of humanity where things like love is revolutionary.
right.
Compassion and empathy are revolutionary. Equality, equity, fairness are revolutionary, right? And these are like at the core of who we are. Like, these are basic qualities that are innate to who we are, right? And so part of the process as individuals and as a collective is deprogramming, deconstructing all the biases, all the prejudices, all of those thoughts and ideas that we have, and really dismantling those, I think, within, working with people that were alike and working with people that were different. And it's like having these conversations so we can all sort of strip away these internal systems. Right. And I think, and Margaret Mead says, never doubt that a thoughtful group of committed citizens could ever change the world, because indeed it is the only thing that ever has. Right.
I love that.
That's really how we take on the system, is that we align and that we create our own systems. And that we create power and strength from that, so that when it comes to legislation, when it comes to regulation, when it comes to policy, that we're there and we're diversely represented, right? That we believe that everybody has an important seat at the table, regardless of any of these sort of identifiable traits that we all have, that we're all labeled.
There was I was listening to the other day, there was a 24-hour podcast live stream of Black folks revolutionizing the airways, called State of the People. And there was a congressman that was on there. And what came up to me while you were speaking was actually him defining empathy. They asked how does he move, because of the unique ways in which the landscape of the state he was he campaigned in. He did it differently. He showed up at things that other people have not showed up. And he said, I've been hungry and couldn't get food. I've been hurt by the hospital system. Like, he centered the pains, not that the pain was exactly identical, but he said, I am my community. I am a part of. And I think when you said that dismantling internally, it starts internal. Yeah. There's no way you can show up in any space, myself included. I cannot show up in any space if I have not done this work inside. So how do we all survive? Yes, we create system within the system and demonstrate through the radicalness of basic humanity. We can radicalize it. Let's claim it. Let's reclaim empathy and compassion. Let's reclaim liberation for ourselves, because once we do that internal work, yes, we can do transformational things within our community.
Yeah, and I want to say this as we're about done. Our participants don't have the luxury and the opportunity to really self-reflect and to have insight
Mm,
when they have to walk 10 miles to get a meal.
yeah.
So, but what I can offer is we have to do that work with ourselves and with each other so that we're ready and so that we're prepared, right, to go when it's time to really take action, whether it's meeting someone at our health and wellness lounge or if it's going to our capital and giving
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful speech on empathy. Great job, by the way. I haven't told you that was very
Oh, thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, it was really beautiful. We're not done, and I feel some kind of way, revving this conversation up today, and then stopping there. I know we've got next time, and we'll keep going. But I also want to say that like this conversation, it needs to continue to happen.
Absolutely. And it will. You are right. The only way to work through this is we don't just unpack it and leave it. We open it, and pull more people in on this journey. We have an opportunity right now, Henry, in the what we're dealing with as a country. It's an opportunity to really show radical love
Yeah,
despite what's going on, and not leaving anyone out, because we're aware that we are actually all in this together, you all. Um, there's no billionaires that are really following this right now. So it's us, it's you, it's us being together, and we look forward to creating more spaces and being intentional, and be prepared. Be prepared to jump in here with us.
I have a challenge before we go. Look,
Okay.
if you know of anyone, if you have personally survived the system, if you've overcome the system, whatever system has kept you trapped and helpless and
Mm.
unable to thrive, if you've overcome that, if you know somebody that's overcome that, reach out to us because we would love to
Yeah,
support you by telling your story. And there's no greater strength than when we can really tell our story authentically.
that's it.
So
I love
please,
it.
yeah, please reach out. Let us know. That's all we got today, right? Our time's up.
Our time is up, you guys. Again, we are excited about what's to come. This is only the beginning. We are still in the beginning. Um, Thank you to our admin and project manager Ryan for throwing that up there real quick. Henry just added
Yeah,
that piece on.
yeah.
But please like, share, and comment. Subscribe. Again, we'll have some things coming out over the next week. The invites for the people who have started this journey with us. We got some stuff happening this year. We're moving and shaking. All right. Any last words, Henry?
Be safe, y'all.
Be safe.
Take care.